you're a frequent flyer and not a member of Mileage Plus, let one of us know. We'll be happy to get you an application and get you signed up. Our flight this evening is under the command of Captain 𝒏𝒊𝒄𝒌𝒔𝒕𝒓𝒆𝒂𝒎, and our scheduled flight time is going to be 14 hours and 2 minutes. In just a few minutes, we will be starting our initial service, which will be our dinner service. And that is accompanied with cocktails or beverages. Midway through the flight, we'll have a light snack available. After our meal service is over, we will be coming through the aisles with our duty-free sales. You'll find that magazine in the seat pocket in front of you. Just keep in mind, however, as you are purchasing duty-free, that if you're continuing on to other domestic flights, you are restricted from taking gels, liquids, or lotions more than 3.4 ounces. We are taking only credit card sales for our duty-free at this time. Just to note also, we do ask for the safety and security of the flight that you use the lavatories in your ticketed cabin. And for security purposes, congregating near the cockpit or lavatories is prohibited. We do certainly realize that many of you will be sleeping this evening, so we ask that you buckle your seatbelt on the outermost garment, whether that be a blanket or a jacket. This is for your safety and also so we don't have to awaken you in the middle of the night if the seatbelt sign comes on to see if you are buckled up. You'll find a full listing of all audio and video programming. You'll find that in the seat pocket in front of you. We will be coming through during the flight sometime, distributing the documentation needed, and you should have that filled out.
Issue for Donald Trump going all the way back to 2015. It's something he wants to see from his running mate here tonight. Vance, on the campaign trail, has been very comfortable in that traditional attack dog role. I don't expect to see much different tonight. You know, Hallie mentioned those favorability numbers with Vance being underwater. A Trump senior advisor said to me some number of weeks ago now that when this race is over, they expect all of these candidates to be unpopular. I think you're not going to see J.D. Vance necessarily try to reinvent himself on this stage. I think you're going to see him go pretty aggressively at Tim Walz and primarily at Kamala Harris throughout the course of the night.
All right, Garrett, thank you.
And for more on what to expect, let's bring in Jason Miller. He's a senior advisor to the Trump-Vance campaign. Great to have you here. Talk about the mission that J.D. Vance has tonight. Is it a rather narrow mission?
Well, J.D. Vance is going to remind people that we had a great economy under President Trump, and that's something that President Trump can bring back literally on day one. He can start getting that back in order. And the other thing President Trump can do on day one is secure our southern border, something that's been completely out of control. But we're going to see really a contrast of ideas, but I think the high bar is set for Tim Walz. I'm going to tell you why. Not only does he have to defend his own record, which is a bit bumpy, he has to defend Kamala Harris's record as DA, AG, senator, vice president. There's a lot there. But also Tim Walz has to defend Joe Biden's record. Joe Biden is the one who's been leading the Democrat ticket over the past 3.5 years. Now, we know a lot of the items have been on Kamala Harris's plate, such as being the border czar, being the deciding vote for 2 of these massive spending bills. But this is really a direction. Do you want to get our economy, get our border back on track? Do you want to keep going in the dangerous direction that we're going right now? J.D. Vance is going to remind people that there is hope, and that's President Trump.
Do you think that J.D. Vance has any work to do, Jason, with this issue of likability. I mean, we mentioned in our poll since 1988, he's the second least popular, the highest negative ratings of any vice presidential candidate. With suburban women in particular, he's got a net negative 21 with suburban women. Do you think he needs to take on some of this baggage, you know, the childless cat lady and all that kind of thing? Is that part of what you hope he addresses tonight?
Is J.D. Vance talks about his upbringing, the humble upbringing he had. Everybody knows from hillbilly elegy that his grandmother largely raised him. His own mother struggled with addiction. He's someone who went and served in the Marines, was served overseas as well. He has a great story, and is able to get out there and talk with voters and tell that story, then I think they're going to move his direction. Keep in mind, not everybody watched the political conventions. Not everybody saw Tim Walz of the Democrats or J.D. Vance of the Republican. So for many voters, this will be the first time that they're really hearing from these candidates. J.D. Vance also, he's probably the best communicator at pushing President Trump's message outside of President Trump. He's doing 2-3 Sunday shows every week. I think this is also something where it could catch up with Tim Walz. They've been playing the Washington Post had a headline this afternoon saying it was the Bubble Boy campaign. Well, now he's in the bright lights, and we'll see how Tim Walz does.
In that same vein, we've seen former President Trump get very personal in this final stretch of the campaign, calling Kamala Harris mentally ill. Do you think that J.D. Vance will channel some of that negative personal material tonight?
I think J.D. Vance is going to really talk about the issues that are impacting the country, and I think he's going to call out some of the inaccuracies that we've seen from Tim Walz, from Kamala Harris, haven't exactly been truthful on the campaign trail. And I'll tell you, Lester, as I was watching one of Tim Walz's debates earlier today, he had this great line in one of his previous debates where he said, "I'm not going to raise your taxes. I'm just going to roll back the tax cuts." Tim Walz can lie through his teeth, but when J.D. Vance starts talking about the economy, how he's going to help everyday people, it's really something that's magical. I think J.D. Vance will do well tonight. I think he'll represent President Trump well. And again, Americans who are struggling to get by or wondering why we have this chaos, there's going to be hope. J.D. Vance can restore that hope.
Jason Miller, thank you.
No, before we let him go, we have to ask him, do you think that President Trump will debate again, Jason? He said no, but people can change their minds.
Well, as of right now, I would say no. As of this moment, this will be the final debate that we see. You know, President Trump's done very well so far in the debates, and I think tonight J.D. Vance will do very well also. Although, again, Tim Walz, he's tough. He's been doing this for 2 decades. He's been in office for 20 years. J.D.'s only been in office for 2 years. So Tim's a professional at this, but J.D. Vance is going to do well.
Okay. Well, just so you know, your boss, Donald Trump, called Walz a total moron last night. So he apparently doesn't think as highly as you do of Tim Walz, but we'll continue to cover it. Yeah. Everyone is doing their expectation setting.
No, but when we talk about the issues, when President Trump is making those types of criticisms, he's pointing out the fact that we've allowed 20+ million illegals into this country. And, you know, the language might be tough. Some people might push back and say that's not their cup of tea. But how does Tim Walz stand on that stage tonight and explain why Kamala Harris allowed 20 million illegals into this country? How does Tim Walz stand on that stage and explain why Kamala Harris had these 2 deciding votes that ultimately led to this record or near record inflation? We have to call out these tough issues. Too many people are struggling. This isn't time for powder puff football. We're going to get right down to it.
Yeah. By the way, the former president was talking about his debating skills. He said when he's going up against a moron, a total moron. So that was the issue. Anyway, Jason Miller, thank you so much. We'll see you later. Appreciate it. All right, let's bring in our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander, who's covering the Harris campaign. So, Peter, what are they signaling about tonight?
Well, it's a good question. As we've been speaking to those people close to Tim Walz, among the things I've heard is his priorities this evening, top among them all, will be to help amplify the case on behalf of Kamala Harris. This is as much about Kamala Harris in the eyes of Tim Walz as it will be about Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, according to those people who are close to his campaign. Notably, this is the first time that these two will ever be in person, J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. It does have the potential for some fireworks. They've been sniping, as we've witnessed for months, but mostly from a distance. Now, for the first time, they get to do it in that traditional running mate role as the attack dog. And one key voter group that I'm told both campaigns have been targeting is men, with Vance and Walz at the forefront of that fight. Walz, of course, the former high school football coach. He's a hunter, a plain-spoken Midwestern dad. Vance, who would be the youngest VP to serve in decades, he's really tried to frame his messaging toward younger guys. It's a place to watch. And as you watch tonight, recognize most Americans who haven't made their mind up yet, and that is a limited sliver of the American electorate right now. Even if they're not watching tonight, the campaigns recognize that it's the soundbite, the simple sound bites that may break through how this is cut up and pieced together and how it gets out to those limited number of undecided voters. To the Harris campaign, a lot of them are younger, particularly younger men, a racially diverse group. It's why they've been advertising on college football games and why they're looking at sports betting sites, among others, to sort of target their messaging in the couple days and weeks ahead.
All right, Peter, thank you. We're going to talk to Senator Mark Kelly in just a moment, but let me turn to the table here. Let's lift the veil off the expectation setting that goes on with the campaigns, because it just makes me laugh. You know, we just had Jason Miller, who's like, oh, Tim Walz is such a great debater, and then all of these Democrats are out in the press saying Tim Walz is scared, he's not sure. J.D. Vance is this amazing debater, so it's like this reverse complimenting thing, so that when whatever happens, they can be like, well, we set those expectations and exceeded them.
By the way, a time-honored tradition for debate
lower the
in decades past, right? I mean, this is what we always see. I actually spoke with the person who played Governor Walz in the prep for Senator J.D. Vance, Congressman Tom Emmer, and he did much of the same thing. This is strategic on the part of the campaigns. Why? Partly to let the audience know that this is kind of what they can expect. Here's the reality. This is not their first rodeo. It is on a stage like this, but both of these candidates have done debates in the past. They've done debates for their races for Congress, for governor, for senator.
They practice. They're smart. They're capable. They're pros.
Exactly.
They're pros. And look, if you talk to allies at both of these campaigns, they say here's the challenge for each of them. For Governor Walz, one ally said a good night for him is if he can keep all of those comments that J.D. Vance once made about Donald Trump, all of the criticism of him, in the spotlight. That's what allies want to see from him. In terms of J.D. Vance, and you were just talking to Jason Miller about this, Savannah and Lester, the comments like the cat lady comments, they want him to stay away from controversial comments. Yes, throw a counterpunch, get into the mix, but they do not want him to reiterate some of those controversies that have been front and center that they feel take away from top issues like the economy, like immigration.
All right, for more on what to expect from the Harris-Walz campaign, let's bring in Arizona Senator Mark Kelly. He's appearing with us tonight as a campaign surrogate. Senator, thank you so much for being with us. Where you hear some of the talk about the expectation game. What is the expectation tonight?
Well, I think it's about contrast. You know, in the case of Governor Walz and Kamala Harris, you've got two people that want to lead this country into the future, that have a vision, that want to bring down costs for health care and prescription drugs and child care and so many other things that affect American families. And on the other hand, you have Donald Trump and his Project 2025. That's going to increase costs, $4,000 out-of-pocket costs for American families. And if you're a senior who has benefited from the prescription drug benefit that we put into place with Kamala Harris and the administration, that would go away. So I would expect that we will see the contrast between what each side is offering.
Will Walz go after former President Trump's record or J.D. Vance's record?
Well, I think what you got to understand about J.D. is he's a Yale-trained, mouthpiece for Donald Trump. Donald Trump is, what matters here. He's a convicted felon. Kamala Harris is an experienced prosecutor, an attorney general, senator, and a vice president who really cares about the American people and cares about families. What I've seen from Donald Trump is, he puts people into two categories. You're either the con man or you're the person being conned, and he offers very little for middle-class, working-class families and everyday Americans.
Senator, you're from the great state of Arizona, of course, my home state. If you can tell, I'm biased toward it. Arizona, of course, was decisive.
Tucson.
Yes, Tucson, Arizona. It was decisive 4 years ago, and yet Kamala Harris seems to be losing ground there. Tim Walz has a rather progressive record on immigration. He's in Minnesota, gave undocumented migrants driver's license, made them eligible for free college tuition, as well as state health insurance. How's that going to play in Arizona?
Well, Savannah, Tim Walz, when he was a member of Congress, was ranked the 7th most bipartisan House member. He served with Gabby. They were freshmen together. I've known the governor, well, and during his service. He's got the experience for this job. And Kamala Harris is ready to go here on day one. And, she wants to take this country into the future where Donald Trump just wants to drag us back into the past and offer more tax cuts for billionaires, shred our alliances, and take away health care rights from women. That's what people should remember about the first Trump presidency.
But is immigration vulnerability in Arizona, I guess just to put a fine point on it, are some of these immigration stances a problem in the state of Arizona, which was decisive last time around?
I was at the border with the vice president on Friday, and we met with sheriff and some mayors, county supervisors, the Border Patrol, and Customs and Border Protection, and talked about these issues. You got to remember, Kamala Harris is a prosecutor and attorney general and senator of a border state. She understands the border very well. And what Donald Trump did on the border, the last thing he did that had a huge impact is he told Republican senators that they could not vote for the bipartisan border security deal that we negotiated with the White House and with Senate Republicans. And what that did is, what it would have done if we could pass it, and we were about to pass it, was it was going to increase Border Patrol pay. We're going to hire more Border Patrol agents, more infrastructure, more fentanyl detection machines. Donald Trump stopped that. Kamala Harris has said that on day one, if we can send her that legislation, and I think we can after Donald Trump loses this election, if we send her that legislation, she'll sign it into law. She's the one who really cares about solving this problem, and will work to try to solve it. Donald Trump just wants to talk about it, Savannah. He often just goes down there to get a picture. I had a very effective visit with her on Friday. It went very well. She's ready to deal with this issue.
Senator Mark Kelly, we've got to leave it there. We've got lots to get to. Thank you for your time.
We'll take a break. Coming up, we're counting down to the first and only vice presidential debate where the two VP candidates will introduce themselves to the country in many ways. We'll have a closer look at who they are and what they bring to the table right after this.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the stream. Appreciate you joining. Looks like this debate's about to get underway. Let me say hello to the folks, though. Welcome to the stream. Jumping in here. I'm sure you are coming in from work and all that. So welcome, okay? We're going to get down. We're going to watch the debate. You know what's going down. J.D. Vance, Tim Walz, vice presidential candidates. All right where seemingly a whole bunch of stuff is going to crap. You know what I mean? And I'm talking about some of this war stuff. You seen some of these videos? Israel, the Iron Dome being overwhelmed. The strike, the port strike. It seems like a lot of chaos, but that might work in J.D. Vance's favor. Welcome everybody to the stream. I'm the American Anchor Baby. I'm streaming on rumble.com/American Anchor Baby, dlive.tv/Gorgonzola, and punchy.tv. So you can watch where you like. Appreciate you joining. And yeah, so it's gonna get going here. Let me turn this down. I'm sure it's gonna get going here. 6 p.m. Pacific, in about half an hour is the idea. And it doesn't seem like anyone in my chat since it doesn't seem like anybody here. I see a lot of criticism for both J.D. Vance and Tim Walz in my chat. I don't see any confidence. I don't quite see any confidence, but we love Trump. We're going to You know, we support Trump. We want to see that J.D. Vance win, right? I mean, whatever you may think about J.D. Vance.
It's as American as apple
I
pie.
don't know, folks.
It's
But
iconic.
what does that mean?
Patriotic. The vote.
I don't know. Is this shallow? Is this just
Step into the box and make it stay.
the range of people, of men,
Voter up.
their age? How old is Tim Walz? Tim Walz, oh, he's 60 years old. So that makes him, what is he? Is he a Gen X? No. How old is Kamala Harris? Yeah, Gen X. They're saying Kamala Harris could be the first Gen X president. Maybe on the older side of Gen X. J.D. Vance, 40 years old. Millennial? Is it just like there's not a lot to pick from? Not a lot. There's not really a good candidate pool to pick from. This is just what we got. You know, like men like Trump, a dying breed. And think about all the people not in politics of that breed. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Is it just that we suck? Do millennials just suck? Everything is getting worse. It's just crappy. It's weird. But hey, I don't see a lot of confidence from the people here and elsewhere. And I think it's because of that. Test. Am I coming in clear? Test. It must just mean low quality, just people across the board. And Tim Walz, I mean, my impression is he's really just, how do I put this? I want to say schoolgirl, but that's not what I mean. What I'm trying to say with that is he's into all these girly things. Like, he's just like a Kamala Harris, but they put a high school coach skin on, you know? Yeah, abortion and healthcare rights and all those things. He talks like a millennial woman. So that's my impression. J.D. Vance, you know, I get a goobery impression. I was just talking with somebody, and this is the word, goobers. Kind of like just goober. I don't know how else to put it. Goobers on both sides, but yeah. I mean, J.D. Vance, he seems based, right? He's based, right, Chad? He's pretty based. Out of all the people that could be beside Trump, you know, they hit on all these points. Like, he's from this area, you know, where the whites are, and he cares about America and the people of America, and he's been here for generations. There's all this, like, especially in this ad, if you saw this
a lot of people
all
feel
this,
like the American.
I don't know if it's fair to call it dog whistling, but all this talk of American stock.
A lot of people feel
White people?
like the American
Is
dream
the
is further
right
and further
person?
away. That if you work hard and play by the rules, it's a little bit harder to get ahead. It's a little bit harder to support a family, a little bit harder to buy a home. The world I grew up in was one where I think for the first time really in American history, you know, my parents' generation did not expect their children to necessarily have a better life than they did. And you saw that in all kinds of different ways, but you know, there was this sense growing up in Middletown in the 1990s that a lot of people didn't expect the future to be better than the past, and that's a really unique and a really tragic thing.
And so you get all those vibes, but I can't help but arrive to this impression I get of J.D. Vance that he's still, how do I put it? He's not a victim, but you got to understand where I'm coming from. That he's still a victim of what he's talking about here, of the lack of successes in his area. He was raised by his grandma. He ended up, you know, he ended up adopting many of the mindsets of his age cohort, despite, you know, being raised in this area of white people and all that. He married an Indian woman, and you understand what I'm saying there? Really a product of the things he's talking about. I don't know, a master of it, but really a product of it. But isn't that everybody? Wild stuff. This debate is going to get going here. And these are the candidates. Look, you guys aren't too confident. I still think it's J.D. Vance's to win here, because not so much for him being so amazing, and I don't really have that much of a distaste of him. You guys got to understand that all these attacks in the media, they're trying to make us dislike him. It's all a thing against Trump. It's all against Trump. So don't be so easily goaded, right? But anyways, I still think it's his to win. It's just, what's he really up against? Kamala Harris as a high school coach. Oh, abortion rights. But look at America right now. And with all this chaos going on, he's got all this ammo. It's really because the other candidate seems to be such a low bar. Win. What are we, effing Romans in the Colosseum? Yeah, everything is fake. Have you ever watched a debate? You think it's about points? You think it's about real definite points and let's add up the points and the judges? No, it's about public opinion, who stays in your mind the most, who like gets the people going, the crowd going. Yeah, we are Romans in the Colosseum right now. So that's welcome to everything is fake. Welcome. Yeah, we're Romans in the Colosseum right now. Manja, bread and circuses. By the way, speaking of bread and circuses, you have your cereal. Who's got their cereal? You don't have your cereal? We're having LNC later after the debate. We're going to have LNC discuss what we can, take calls. I got some pretty fancy stuff here. I don't even know what it's called. I cannot pronounce it. I don't read Japanese. But this is some highly advanced Japanese cereal tech that was sent to me, given to me by a fine gentleman. And I appreciate it. This is some crazy stuff. Japan is advanced with their cereal tech. All right, America, pay attention. Okay? We don't want to lose cereal hegemony over the world here with such bangers like the Oreo cereal. I mean, how many more can I tell you? America obviously has been killing it with the cereal. So we don't want to lose that hegemony in the world to Japan, but they're doing great work. So we're going to have some LNC later today. Make sure you have your LNC, your late night cereal for stuff. Okay, we're going to have cereal. This debate. Let's see what's going on here. They're still getting all their stuff together. Bro, America is so good with all the wars going. I've been doing the math. What do you mean, Galahad? Because that's pretty wild. And this is important. It's thematic for this very debate. When you have 40,000 troops, U.S. troops over there in the region, Israel and all that, questions like, what happens if a U.S. carrier is struck, if a U.S. Base or troops are struck or whatever? What happens next? I mean, these are important things. These questions matter. What would happen? What is the plan? Those are fine things that I'd like to hear what J.D. Vance has to say about. And Tim Walz, sure. But I'm sure you know by now. Strikes from Iran into Israel in a major escalation. And they say it overwhelmed the Iron Dome to some degree, and you got all these wild videos of missiles seemingly hitting Israel, like where the civilians are. And you got to wonder what's next. You got to wonder what's next. And I have some ignorant thoughts on that. You could in a moment. But I'm hearing reports that no one hurt in Israel. Let me see. Where was this? I'm hearing reports that there were no casualties. And that only one Palestinian person was killed. And so whatever. Well, I'm sure we'll get more deets. We'll get the deets on that. But that's what's up. Major strikes, escalation with Iran. Will it be a major war is the question. War. Yeah, I really don't know. I kind of want to stop there because, you know, I'm a little too ignorant, folks. Israel is effing them up, though, Zenny, I gotta say. And I mean, I guess I give you my ignorant view. You guys can maybe help me out. Where am I wrong here? But okay, so basically, you got these Jews. They show up like almost 100 years ago in the area, and they have nothing, and they got enemies everywhere, and now they're dominating the region, dominating it. You gotta understand where they came from to whatever you might think of that, how it went down, and who's at fault, and blah blah blah. You know, you ask me. The Europeans at the time carved out, I've said this before, carved out that area, gave it to the Jews, and then the people there fought. But that's how they left it. That was their foothold. And now, all this time later, they seemingly dominating the region, taking down regional power after regional power. Where's Egypt? Where's Syria? I mean, they used to be big opposition to Israel. Where's Saudi Arabia? Oh, they're actually friends. Normalizing ties, thanks to America. Whatever. Big story over there. We don't know that. We're not going to get into it, but can you say what you could say many things, but you got to admit that's amazing. That's truly amazing. And that could be bad, good, I don't know, but that's amazing to go from a number of just some Jews that they arrive and now they dominate the region. That's some sort of excellence, no? So anyways, I mean, and then so people say you can't do that. You can't do what you're doing. But it's like Putin. They tell him, "Oh, you can't take the Donbass. You can't do that." Says who? Says who? And so that's it's my maybe ignorant view of it, but I can't help but see how America would do a similar thing if they had similar enemies. They would follow a similar path of removing said enemies and taking control. I mean, you got to respect that. And are they really wrong for that? And then it comes to the whole story of America, though. And then that's another story. Where is America involved in that? And with a man like Bibi, which I see him like a Trump, I wouldn't tell other countries to trust Trump fully. No, you guys got to handle your thing the way Trump handles America's business well. And in that same respect, we can respect Bibi and that party over there, but we can't trust them in that way because they're different. There's a limit to that trust. Anyways, with any nation. That's just how I see it. So that's that whole thing. And then why should the question then becomes for me, why should Americans die? And should they? Maybe should Americans die in that region for what is essentially a war for their safety and even beyond safety? And I don't know, it's a little weird because I like the Jews. I like the Jews. I see all the people that hate them, and I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna team up with those people. Those people suck. And they're jealous. They're jelly of the Jews. And so I don't know. I'd like to hear what the peeps got to say about this. What you guys got to say. What JD Vance because it's heating up, seemingly. So, you guys are writing for me. Hold on. I got a lot of things going on right now. Let's see. And we'll open up the phone lines later when we have LNC. Let's see. Let me see what's going on here. Let's see. People are trying to chat to me in the chat. Hold up here. Now I don't know if these are from today. I think they are from today. Carver, thanks for the super chat. Says money for a tampon machine in Nick's stream men's room What are you, Tim Walz? What's going on, Carver? Get out of here. 𝒔𝒐𝒄𝒊𝒂𝒍𔔔, thank you for the super chat. Says Jesus is coming back soon. What do you mean by that? I hear Christians say that a lot, and I don't know what that means. I heard he already came. So let me see what's Galahad saying to me. I see you're tagging me in my chat. Nugget Man, it's all about the Ben Gurion Canal, yet nobody wants to talk about what is that? What's the Ben Gurion Canal? And why doesn't anybody want to talk about it? Galahad, American Anchor Baby, you reading this ish because I'm writing it for you. Wait, hold on. I don't TLDR, man. TLDR, Galahad. So anyways, they're still talking, these talking heads on the debate, but they're counting it down, 16 minutes away. Yeah, keep it pithy. So yeah. Big strikes. What's our role? But I mean, I feel like JD's got a lot there. A lot there to put over Tim Walz and really by extension, obviously, Kamala Harris. It's a mess. And so they get JD Vance has the luxury of that position of debating against the incumbent and asking them, well, you guys messed up. You guys are messing up. This is you guys. Explain yourselves. Explain yourselves how you're not going to be right. So he's got a good position for him. He's got the advantage, in my opinion. He's got the edge here. He's got the edge here. Okay. Kale, you had a super chat from yesterday I didn't read. Thank you, Kale. I don't know if I read this. In fact, I think I didn't. He says, I thought it was common sense that the market for stuff is because of the suppliers and consumers, both equally responsible. Oh, yeah. We were talking, 𝒔𝒐𝒄𝒊𝒂𝒍�g's super chatting because I had a call yesterday. And this caller was saying that basically the Jews control everything, and so that was one claim. Then he said something else about what they run, like specifically the porn industry, he was saying. But I was asking him, well, assuming that's true, who's making the non-Jews watch the porn? And he couldn't answer me. I don't know. People disagree. You know, they see an equal responsibility to assign to both the drug user and the drug dealer, right? The porn dealer and the porn user. But I would say that it skews at least a little bit, if not a lot, a bit. I'd say a lot. But it skews, at least for any rational, reasonable person, you got to say that it skews a little bit to the drug user. Because that whole relationship wouldn't exist without the drug user. Okay? It just wouldn't. Kind of how Satan only is able to have only able to be effective when you allow it, because you believe his lies. So in that similar way, I'd say actually the responsibility skews a little bit to the drug user. So that was that. Thank you for that super chat though, 𝒔𝒐𝒄𝒊𝒂𝒍�gg. I'd say it skews just a little bit. And I think I think you can really nitpick this. I don't know, maybe I'll learn sometime in the future. Maybe this is a immature thing, and there's something about this nitpicking that makes me feel like I got something wrong. But it seems to me like you can compartmentalize these things. And what are these things I'm talking about? I'm talking about Jewish hate. You can compartmentalize these topics, like the people here in America, the white people and others hating Jews and blaming them for their problems. That's stupid. That's born out of anger, and anger makes you stupid. And you're giving up all this power to people who don't have it. You're making them gods over your morality and your values. That's crazy. I think you can compartmentalize Israel, the nation, and their influence in the world and in America, etc. You could, all these things that get brought up with this war stuff and Jewish stuff. Am I crazy? Like, it seems like that's not controversial. It doesn't seem like that's controversial. Like, these are all like a little bit different. So, anyways, doesn't seem controversial to me. So yeah, nitpicking. What do you guys want to talk about so badly? You guys are just. I have some people in my chat. You can oversimplify or nitpick, yeah, as with most subjects of adequate complexity. I'm just admitting my ignorance, okay? I mean, right? Isn't Israel the nation different than like Jews and then different places? And it's funny, isn't Israel going through like similar things in America? They have like liberals and conservatives, and they have like what, almost like Marxism, right? No, happening in their politics. Anyways, it's all about the JQ, says Kevin. Everything's about it. I don't know. I can't subscribe. Anger is evil is like the only truth. As time goes on, I can only see it's anger is evil is the only truth. Nick, let's talk. No. What do you guys want to talk about so badly? You're jumping in my Discord. You're like, Nick, I gotta say something. What? You guys like foreign policy experts or something? You guys know exactly what should happen with war and all that. What do you have to say? Okay, fine. Here, let me kick you. Put you here. Look, I'm putting the link to my Discord in the chat. If you guys want to be part of it, guess what? I'm going to take calls after the debate, but guess what my Discord people get to do? You guys have a luxury, a privilege of being able to talk to me even before taking any calls, in fact. So ain't that nice? Galahad, what's up? You're in here with me.
What's up, bro?
How you doing, sir?
Doing well. How are you?
All is well. We're a few minutes away from this debate, and you're a part of my Discord, so let's talk. It sounded like you have something to say about all this.
Gonna be fire. Yeah, man, let's talk. Do you remember we were talking about Ukraine last time, about NATO and all that?
A little bit.
Right, so I figured it out.
Are you far from your phone or a speaker or something like that?
I'm on speaker. Let me change that.
Thank you.
Is it better now?
Thank you.
Well, yeah, we were talking about NATO last time by Ukraine, right? So the reason that that America was funding the neo-Nazis and all that stuff to take over Ukraine is because Russia exports gas through Ukraine to East Europe. And 50% of their federal funding is done through gas. So right now they were doing about, I think, 60%, and now they're doing 15. They're down to 15% of what they were originally exporting.
You mean
Ukraine?
So
that crippled Russia. In Ukraine, Russia exported the gas through Ukraine. So now they're down to 15%, so they cannot fund their federal government right now because of that war. So that was America's move for taking Ukraine, to cripple Russia. Why crippling Russia? Because Russia was the only guys that would back China taking Taiwan. Why Taiwan? Taiwan holds 90% of semiconductor production in the world. So America right now, through the Chips and Technology Act on 2022, they are trying to raise up and own the semiconductor manufacturing chain, supply chain in the world.
Right. Yeah, just regional powers conflict and vying for power. Yeah, the two sides, the anti-West side, the pro-West side.
Right.
Big
so
time. I get that. I get that a little bit.
So America right now is funding about $100 billion to build foundries of chips in Arizona right now through Intel and through TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing
This
Company.
is all your impression?
Trying-
This is just your, like, this is kind of like your impression?
No, this is hard data. This is hard data. So they are trying to bring the semiconductor supply chain inside the U.S. through policy and through this funding. But they have trouble with Taiwan. Taiwan realized that they were just trying to import the know-how and not really the people. So they started like meddling with TSMC's foundries in Arizona, and that is going to take 5 years.
All right,
Intel,
so I mean, what was the point of this, though? I'm forgetting why I even brought you on. I thought this was about Iran, or what were you even saying about this?
It's all the same. It's all the same. It's all the same. Look here. So you through Intel and TSMC, you got 5 years to build the infrastructure to be able to own the supply chain for semiconductors, which is the most valuable resource in the world right now.
Right. So they're fighting. There's fighting. I got you. They're fighting for power and control, and so right. But what's the point? How's this going to end? And who are the real players? Who are the real players, and who's pushing all this?
Yeah. So real players is America. America started to move their pawns around, so they funded Ukraine right now to weaken Russia so they couldn't back China, and they weakened China by tariffs and policy changes that you've been doing, putting sanctions on China for their EV, their electrical vehicle manufacturing as well.
So who's
that electrical vehicle?
So is that So is that just make it simple, like for the people? Like, is that Biden and Harris, or is that the people supporting Ukraine, or is that and what is Trump and what side is he on?
Biden and Harris, they're all puppets. It's all deep state stuff. At the same
so the
time,
deep state is backing the Ukraine stuff.
Yes, and the deep state also lowered the federal interest rates last week by 50 points, 0.5%, to help America's economy rise up again, because the Democrats were trying to impoverish the people to keep in power. But that wasn't gelling well with the whole deep state.
I got you, God. So what do you think is going on now? What's this latest? Like, what's going on?
So with Israel, Intel has foundries in Israel, and they were also purchasing the other foundry over there for semiconductors.
So these wars are all about chips? These wars are all about computer chips?
They're all about computer chips. That is exactly right.
I mean, that sounds a little bit like... I gotta say that. I mean, wait. To who? To America? This war is all about. These wars are all about computer chips for America. What about for Bibi?
Exactly.
Are the wars all for computer chips for him?
No, they are just a proxy war, and because the Hezbollah. Do you remember we're talking about Hezbollah right now? They have 40,000 armed individuals over there, and those guys with the Allahu Akbar shit stuff. Sorry.
It's late night.
They're a danger to Russia and to everyone, because they're ideologically unaligned, right? Russia is Christian, America is Christian, so in a sense we get each other. China is not. That's why Russia and China are a little flaky about that. So the whole thing is about technology.
So is the war about technology and chips, or is it about aligning powers and regional conflicts? And for regional control, which one is it then?
It's both. It's political hegemony for America,
right?
But that can only be done through,
and for Bibi too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Bibi, they're just there because
you support
they have
Bibi
the
or no
enemy
in his endeavors to create greater Israel and safety for his people, etc.
The plan right now, if you see like every murder attempt to Trump, they try to pin it on Iran, and Iran was backing Hezbollah. So it's all about, you know, taking out the Muslims, gaining control of the supply chain for semiconductors, and through that, because
You saying that's the plan for Israel?
That's the plan for America. Israel is just a pawn for America, same as everybody else. Right now, we're a tripolar world. It's only America, Russia, China, and their satellite, you know, colonies.
And what makes you say that what's your evidence on that? Because I mean, I hear otherwise, and I don't know what to think. So I'm playing devil's avocado with you, just to hear what you got to say. What's your evidence on that? That Israel is the puppet of. So what's the point here? If Israel is this puppet, what is the grand point here with America?
Because Israel is ideologically aligned.
Why make Israel
America.
bigger? Sorry. Oh, I see. Because we're ideologically aligned.
Exactly. They're not as much. They're more easily controlled than Muslims taking over the gas resources and the semiconductors in Israel. Right? There's what is the it's not Gibraltar, it's the Suez Canal. That is how they pass through all the resources to Europe.
Right.
To the Mediterranean.
And that's
in
where
Israel, right?
That's in the Egypt.
The Suez Canal?
Yeah, the Suez, or the one that had that boat blocking it that had that problem.
Yeah,
right?
that is a
like
major geopolitical.
Yeah, the center. I mean, think about it. The gate. What do they call it? The gateway from the east to the west.
Yeah,
and controlling that is major.
That is major because if you see, all of Europe has all of the resources coming through that. Right?
Gotcha.
They can go up there from India and from China. They all go through that.
So you're saying if Israel like Bibi and Israel, if they're able to achieve all the things they want to achieve, you're saying this is really just a win for America, and we own the Suez Canal basically.
Exactly. Yes, sir. You got it.
What makes you say that?
You can see it right here, right? You can see it in the map, right?
I mean, I see it on the map, but what makes you say that's what makes you come to that conclusion?
Who supplies money for Israel and weapons?
Say again?
Who supplies money and weapons to Israel?
America.
America, baby.
But wait, how does that prove what you said though? Because you could be right. If you ask me, that kind of sounds awesome. And so that makes me think, right on, Jews. I mean, if we're in a team up like that sounds awesome to me. But wait, how to prove?
Exactly.
Prove that.
Exactly. It's
you're
like
just saying that we're giving them money. What does that mean? How does that prove what you're saying? Just for a little devil's avocado.
They wouldn't give it money otherwise. Like, you have to ask yourself, what is the interest of America?
We'll talk about this later. We're starting the debate. All right, folks. Anyways, I don't know everything about that, but it's an interesting thing. It's heating up. But look, this is heating up.
Let's introduce the candidates.
They're introducing the candidates, okay? Pipe down, Galahad. We'll get back to you.
Republican Senator J.D. Vance tonight meeting for the first
time. Let's go. Come on, get excited. Get a little excited.
I'm Margaret
Support
Brennan.
J.D. Vance. Don't be a
thoughtful and civil debate. These are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator.
There's so many women. It's just women and women.
To facilitate the debate between
the talking heads were all women.
Enforce the rules and provide the candidates with the
it's
opportunity
just back-to-back women. You guys want to talk about Jewish occupied government? Women occupied government. You know, I was asking. Sorry, do you guys care about the rules?
Or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor.
This is more important. I was talking to the Mexicans at the Shell gas station, and they were afraid to say. They were saying it under their breath and looking around about. I was like, "You guys really want a woman president?" And they would do this. They're like, "No, Nick.
And now a labor strike.
You want to talk about Jewish-occupied government? How about woman-occupied men in America? All men subject to women. That's a...
Thank you, Nora.
And their God is Satan, so... Anyways, I don't know. Anyways.
But that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago, a nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met.
J.D. Vance's answer really be that different?
Both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together. Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin,
just tell him you're going to bomb Iran.
North Korea. When we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the Vice President said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Just tell them you're going to bomb Iran already.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit, because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working-class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator.
So, yes,
Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership.
True, but it might have been
and when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him.
That might be sick, though.
Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump, who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years, and the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane, because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today, actually, a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job, and I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane, and my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together to solve the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover, but we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have.
We're farmers,
also
but we care about
more
abortion.
Clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
We're white boy farmers,
Senator,
but we care
I want to give
about
you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years. Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing worse by the climate.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
These two are politicians.
We're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But the folks know, and like I said again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our #1 export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign, and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora.
America's best
We're going to turn
politician.
now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
Unfair.
So first of all, Margaret, before
Dirty
we talk
question.
about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Like effective
Governor,
and politician, but solid.
Do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions.
You heard this.
But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this. And that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no. told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this, and he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time
They're both
is
lying.
up.
I'll tell you later
Senator,
why, but
the question
Vance
was,
bodied
will
him.
you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this, and Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true, don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our border czar, Kamala Harris, has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed, you've got hospitals that are overwhelmed, you have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree, it should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. Look, I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn now to the economy. Thank you,
Margaret. The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own
Thank you, Senator, for
leadership.
describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret. The economy is a top concern for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do, we'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best, more people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years, she had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%, open the American southern border, and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts, but if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one, whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there,
bad advice. Teachers,
nurses, truck drivers, or whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, in the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it.
You're not smart enough.
He's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
You say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more
white
difficult.
people, I haven't
We had
forgotten
companies
about
that
you.
were willing to ship it
This is
over,
his-
and we saw people profit.
I didn't forget about
folks
you white people.
Folks that
part of
are
this.
venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So I appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
that's a gross generalization.
that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you've simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on health care then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Tough question. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect, and I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that.
Is he admitting it or not?
People elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything.
So you lied.
Many times I will talk a lot.
Just say you
I will
lied.
get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID, and I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at,
flips he's
or whether
doing
it was
right
being
now.
a good soldier,
He's
or was being a
flipping
good
and
member of
turning and
Congress, those
slipping
are the
and
things I
sliding.
think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the
and they're going tough on him.
All I said on this was, I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So
he lied.
I will just.
Okay, thank you.
That's what I've said.
Silence.
So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Ouch.
Thank you, Governor.
All right, let's move on
Senator
from that one.
Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate, Donald Trump, unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler.
Yeah, F you.
I know you've been asked many times, and you've
Vance. I'm
said
sorry.
you regret those comments. and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, "Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism." You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade. 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it. I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
That's like the best way to answer this question. That's horrible for Republicans.
Yeah, well, the question got asked and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that.
JD,
you
move
mentioned,
on.
I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making child care more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
Well, I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator?
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
All right. All right, that's segment 1, I guess. They'll be back for more. I think so. Here, hold on.
Watch out, California.
Yeah. They'll be back for more. What do you guys think so far? I mean, honestly, if you ask me, we're watching two politicians. Two big-time politicians. Like, what I mean by big-time, I mean, every answer is like word salad, but well-crafted word salad. The best word salad you'll ever... No, but they're good at this. And, you know, I feel like this is some of the criticisms people had for Trump. And they would... When they say, Trump, you should be more on brand in messaging, you got to think out your responses more. They're asking Trump to act like this. And if you ask me, I'd rather him not. I'd rather him be himself. And, you know, a lot of these answers are well crafted. Like they thought about how they're going to handle reproductive rights. And the J.D. Vance people, they thought well about how they're going to handle the Haitian thing. But it's all politician. Like if you notice when they're talking about the Haitians, J.D. Vance basically did they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs, but he did it politician and nice. And the schools are overwhelmed and the housing is unaffordable. What else, JD? Go hard. Come on. Hit him with it. Come on. Don't hold back. They're eating the dogs. Okay. So it's all nicey, two politicians, and they're just hitting all the points. And that's why it sounds like word salad, but it's well-crafted word salad. And if you've been doing this for a while and you know what you're listening for, you know, they're hitting all the points. You know, I think it's skewed on JD Vance. Let's be real. JD Vance, is kind of smoking him on some of these things. definitely their bread and butter. The Republican campaign's bread and butter right now. The border, the hurricane, the war. I mean, all that it's all skewed on J.D. Vance, and he's delivering it the way he's delivering it, but it's just the matter of fact because he's got that on his side. He has the edge there, regardless of how he's delivering. But anyways, he's that's how I take it. Politicians doing their politician thing. It makes me not trust them, but hey, let's go J.D. Vance. Let's go Trump. Let's go. What else about this? The moderators suck. They're women, and they're kind of like just like the past debate. They're kind of going hard on JD on a couple of things. Like for example, they are you going to separate families though? And then he answers that. But what about the families? Are you going to support them? Just trying to go hard mode on JD and easy mode on Tim. It's a classic story. Classic story. They should get the wives in next. That's funny. But what can I say? Politicians, word salad. They're keeping it together, keeping it all high and tight with their tie up and whatever. And I can't help but also call out the general. What is this? How do I describe this? Tell me if I'm wrong about this. Yeah, I agree. Everything is fake. Something to spice this up. Can we get a little? What's Tim Walz's wife? I don't know what. Oh, Tim Walz's wife is that little short one, right? Gwen. She's that little short one who's way too outspoken. Tim Walz, it's not a good look for you. Just way too outspoken. And they high five. That's cute though. They high five. I think they're friends, and that's nice. What was I gonna say though? I was about to say. I forgot what I was gonna say. Politicians. It's weak in some respects, but I forget what I was going to say. Not that important. We're almost back here. We're coming back to the debate.
Welcome back.
Oh yeah, the mods, they suck. Women.
We want to turn now to America's
I forgot what I was going to say about that, but whatever.
Epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no, and the details really matter here. Of course, for example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. JD. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff.
Not your family.
We do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartel. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that worked. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen.
What
Even
else
though they
is,
have a high gun
can you
ownership
tell me
rate
other
in the
details
country.
about Finland?
There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go?
Yes.
When we know
forts are cozy.
There's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. And I'm sorry about that, and I hope that it's okay. Christ have mercy.
Stop,
it is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said, actually, about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly, weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse, or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but if only later in your political
career. If only we could talk about certain details here.
Why?
Yeah, I sat in my office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is, talking about cities and where it's at, the number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues. Making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns, and there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank
He
you,
leaves
Laura.
out. He brings
Let's
up
turn now to
suicide.
the
That's
top
interesting. You know,
contributor to
suicide brings up
inflation,
the gun
high
violence
cost of
numbers
housing
by a lot.
and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around.
What else
Those
is
are
it?
not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the Vice President is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, one of the, certainly for me, using the GI Bill is one thing, but a veteran's home loan,
almost every state has down payment
about a
assistance
veteran's
of
home
some
loan
sort.
is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back, and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with, but the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens if you lower energy prices? As Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs aside from illegal immigration is, think about it, if a truck driver's paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, yeah. Governor, we will get to you in a moment, but Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in
Well, of course, that's not true. And again,
and
you have the facts. I guess we agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question,
straight up
are we
lie?
going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal land,
Crossings
these are
down.
really important pieces of land.
What metric?
Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that.
That's how everybody
I
sees
think there's
it.
better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor,
Where's
your
the study?
time is up. But Senator, on that
sorry.
point, I'd like
guy's a
for you to
Canadian.
clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
Dang. What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. Look, it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't didn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president,
it won't get
he has a
done.
record to be proud of. Prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, you know, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and health care costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out.
A woman, being a woman is a pre-existing condition?
Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher. And he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now. that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then
so
what
you
happens
think the individual mandate's a good idea?
You shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret?
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in America.
The ladies aren't having it this time.
There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world
Right on, ladies.
without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you've said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers, we get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota, and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue. Those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some places, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as child care on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you
just
support
say women
a national paid
shouldn't
leave
be
program?
expected to
And if
take care of
so,
children?
for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company, but the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that
stop
makes
working and stay home.
possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal program programs that we have that support paid family leave right now. The Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of child care model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with child care. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide child care in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote child care, because look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country
These guys
that does
are
it. I
cucked
think
to
we could do
women.
a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many
gotta
things
forgive your
about
mama,
the American
JD and Tim.
family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on child care as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, child care options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families.
But make
women, the
women
reason it's so expensive right now
care for
is
their
because
children?
you've got
Impossible.
way too few
We'll never
people
do that.
providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator.
Ridiculous.
Governor Walz,
Absolutely
your
ridiculous.
ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear
This is the biggest
it's not
issue.
that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with child care and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on.
If he was based, he would say,
because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president, Donald Trump left the White House, and now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate. I think there was a lot of commonality here, and I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator. But
me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling.
I'll tell you why later from that
answer. I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this. And the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag. Several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence, and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So
is that the
I think
pot
this
calling
issue
the kettle
of settling
black?
our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
No. F you.
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, It's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor. January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement, but this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah. Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America.
What election did he take?
Will you keep your
Biden is president,
even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News Vice Presidential debate continues.
Are we going to get more? Round 3? No. It's got to be ending.
Super Prof helped.
It's got to be like ending statements, right?
The result, 0 wrong.
Who's winning, folks? Who's winning? Honestly, we got the politicians, like I was saying before. They're nice. I mean, look, how many times have they both gone to each other saying, well, a lot of Vance doing this, but going like, they did this to each other multiple times. You know what? I agree with you. You know what? That's even a good thing that you're saying. You know what? I agree with you, but you know what? That's even a nice thing. I would do that too, but couple of fellas, couple of white guys, real, I don't know what I'm saying. They're just cordial. I don't know what to tell you. They're gonna crack a cold one right after the debate. Yeah, boring. Can we agree? Everything is fake. Saying a lot of you are saying it's boring. Boring. Where's the bread and circuses? Where's the gladiators? You're supposed to get this is a coliseum. You're supposed to get us excited. And I'm messing around, but that's kind of true. When it comes to a debate like this, it's shallow, but interesting. I mean, what did I want to mention here? What did they talk about? Child care crisis. You know what? You know what's actually interesting? Child care crisis, health care, even democracy a little bit, gun legislation. Where were they really radically different? Despite all the times they were saying to each other, we're differently philosophy. Wait, where were they really that different? On gun legislation. Here's Vance calling it gun violence. I mean, they're just really good politicians. They really gotta navigate the American public. And you know what ends up happening? They end up sounding the same. Gun violence, says J.D. Vance. Tim Walz lying about crossings are down. But, you know, that's where the Republicans are killing it. Healthcare, child care crisis. I would like to deal with the child care crisis. Well, how long should employers be mandated? The answer is they shouldn't be mandated. What place is the government? Well, that's negotiable, says Tim Walz, meaning, and we have Congress to debate that, meaning, don't worry, we'll decide that and you don't get a say, American public. But anyways, how long should employers be mandated? JD says, well, it's a bipartisan solution. And guess what? Guess who decides this bipartisan solution? The very same Congress that Tim Walz basically said is going to choose for you, employers. You don't get rights. You don't get to choose. It's a bipartisan. The cultural pressure on young women. Some women, they want to stay home. And the plans, they don't work. It's just so much pressure. And they want to stay home with the children. Then do it. But they want to work. So, cuck to women, but what can you say? I mean, these are the VPs. You know, it's a lot to ask these days. Show me a man not cuck to women. It's a lot to ask for, I understand. What, there's Trump and like nobody else. Who else? Name them. Name them. I don't know. I don't see them. Democracy, right on. You know what? On the democracy thing, I'll say this. I think Trump really does have a good VP pick here, because on the what I'm trying to say here is that I guess you just need a politician. Sometimes you just need a politician to navigate and give politician answers. And on J6 and democracy, you know what, Trump, you got JD there for you to back you up. You know what I mean? So, hey, there's something about that, I guess. Right? He says, JD's, I'm focused on the future, okay? Don't ask me about if Trump won 2020 or not. Ask him about that. I'm focused on the future. There's something to appreciate about that, but, you know, I'd like to see a maverick, but maybe it's not what we need. Look, they're back.
And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country, and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or your exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself.
Happiness.
Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road.
Who did he say?
Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Maya Angelou's a hater, and you just invoked the white hater, America hater.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl, and that too has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until
You weren't that bad. At the beginning, it was crazy.
And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you and good night.
We're buddies. Hey, they're going to crack a cold one.
Walz, J.D. Vance squaring off for about 90 minutes in the heart of Midtown Manhattan. The CBS News
They're going to go, look at that, just yucking it up.
Yeah. After what was really a quite civilized
Where are you going to go afterwards? Hey, Usha, we got I forgot Gwen and Usha. They're about to go on a double date.
Our senior Washington correspondent, Lester, here, still with me in New York City. I really am struck.
To play a couple board games. Hey, you know what? Yeah,
policy debate on the issues. Didn't get nasty.
We're still chatting.
We're done with this. So, all right. So what do y'all think? Who won? I don't know if anybody won, if anyone killed it, but when it comes down to like the subject matter, it skews to JD in a sense, because everything's kind of in his favor. They're the incumbent. They've made a mess of things. There's a lot of chaos he's able to stand on, but being all nice and cordial and all that, And honestly, I think it could have been it's not a time to play, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's not a time to play. And all that nice stuff actually is kind of just purely negative for JD. You understand? It's not just neutral. I'd say it's actually negative. I'd say it's negative because it doesn't really hammer the things they have. Meanwhile, Tim, of course, hammers the few things they do have. And they hammer it. Women and the feelings and the joy and the health care and the reproductive rights and the child care shortage. Can I comment on something, though, that I can't help but look? I think it bends to JD in that sense. Like I said, obviously we want Trump to do his best, making America great again. But I can't help but be, and I'm not trying to be a cynic here. Look, I'm not trying to be anything. But the low bar, and I don't know if it's because we got the two politicians. Not that Kamala isn't a politician, but the low bar for Americans, for America. You know, in America, you should be able to afford a nice meal. A nice meal? Afford a nice meal? In America, we should have a little energy. Be able to lower the taxes a little bit. Get a little bit of tax cuts. We should have a little bit of tax cuts and a little bit of child care and a little bit of, you know, some tax cuts and ease it a little bit on. And you should be able to afford a meal. I can't help but notice this low bar on these tired old politician promises. And we got to stop the bleeding. We got to stop the bleeding, and then we'll deal with, meaning no deportations will happen, meaning the American working class will not be truly, look, even on the Democrats, Tim, we're going to build houses and give you tax cuts. And, you know, do you understand that close to half of Americans just don't own houses and will not own houses, as opposed to like 30 years ago when it was like 70% of Americans owned homes, and then go back before that, it's even higher. And then it's like before that, there was like wars and depressions and stuff. So, you know, it gets a little nitpicky. But it's just tired old politician promises. We're going to build houses. I don't know if they're coming from Tim, but they're kind of coming from JD a little bit. Tax cuts and anyways, I'm still with I'm still with Trump, obviously. I'm just hearing out the politicians, and I've heard a lot of this stuff before. I want to go through my notes real quick, but you know what? Hold on. Let's see. What are we going to do? Because you guys got to get your cereal ready. Get your cereal ready. In a moment here, we will have LNC. Let me open up the phone lines in case you want to call in. We'll take a few calls here. It's getting late. Okay, we do have Manhood Hour and all that on the Jesse Lee Peterson show tomorrow, bright and early. So, you know, we want to get out of here. So if you do want to call, don't dilly-dally. Call right away because, look, come on, don't dilly-dally. We got stuff in the morning. So if you're going to call right now, 844-900-2229. So don't dilly-dally. If you want to call away. If you don't want it, it's okay. Don't worry. We're about to have LNC no matter what. Allow me to put together some of my thoughts, final thoughts, if I may, while we up some cereal. Okay? So just chill out a moment here. Could you just please chill out just for a second? Just for a little bit here. Okay? Be right back. Wait, not this. All right, be right back.
Quero esquecer você, mas não consigo porque por você eu me enfeiticei, por você eu me enamorei, por você eu me enfeiticei, por você eu me enamorei. Sei que não devo querer você tanto assim, pois esse desejo é proibido para mim. Mas foi aquele beijo sem querer que você me deu, que meu amor por você nasceu, que meu amor por você nasceu. Mas foi aquele beijo sem querer que você me deu, que meu amor por você nasceu, que meu amor por você nasceu. Sei que não devo querer você tanto assim, pois esse desejo é proibido para mim. Mas foi aquele beijo sem querer que você me deu, que meu amor por você nasceu, que meu amor por você nasceu. Mas foi aquele beijo sem querer que você me deu, que meu amor por você nasceu, que meu amor por você nasceu, que meu amor por você nasceu, que meu amor por você nasceu.
All right, y'all. We got our cereal. Everybody has their cereal. Very nice. I'm about to pull up my own bowl of cereal here. But I guess I wanted to try and give some final thoughts here. I think I gotta sleep on it. I gotta smoke on it, sleep on it. As time passes, I'm growing increasingly. I'm getting increasingly distasteful of some of the moments. I feel like JD rocked it in some places, obviously where the Republicans matter, but I'm really starting to feel like on the guns, childcare crisis, on all the Democrat stuff, it wasn't like it was kind of a big loss. But whatever. I mean, this is stupid. I feel silly even thinking like this. I don't even know if anyone cared about any of it. It was boring. What are the clippable moments? Here I am trying to tally up the points and who got what striking, and I don't know if anyone's gonna even see it like that. But yeah, a lot of like I get it. I mean, I heard it from Tim too, though. It was really coming from both of them, but a lot of JD going, I get it. Yeah, no, you're right. I get it. You're right, but. It's like when I'm talking with callers, and sometimes I'll be like, you know what I mean, man? Like, you know what? Do you understand me? It's like, who am I trying to appease? What is this? What is this like? Do you know what I'm trying to like? Just speak on it, my ninja. You know what I mean? Anyways, yeah. Good. Hopefully, there's no more debates. Okay, no more debates, please. JD, I mean, you know, he did have these well-crafted answers. I want to point this out again. That, remember, folks, this is what people wanted Trump to be. Remember all the criticisms they were giving Trump. Trump, you should stay on message. You should have better, well-crafted answers. You would want basically him to be like JD tonight. Yeah. Now we know that that's not what we want. Okay. Right, folks. We can agree. And I see calls. I'm about to get to you. Appreciate you calling in. Now we can all agree, right? Now we can all agree. We don't want that. Especially not from Trump. Thank you for the super chats, by the way. Ryan8U says, thanks, Nick, Bond, and chat homies. Appreciate that. John Zimmer, generous, says, thanks for the show. I guess I'll go eat some cake now. Best to all. Yes, all. And David Morgan, thank you for the earlier hype super chat emoji. So that was what I wanted to say about that. What else? Let me see if I can scroll up on my notes and remember anything important, because I want to get this all out, and then we'll get to the call while I pull up my cereal. I want to get this all out before I pull up, because the cereal will get soggy. Okay? And you don't want that. We don't want our cereal to get soggy, okay? You want to get in there when you pour it up. Hake says the most clippable moment was sarcastic moderatesses saying thank you, Senator, for explaining how the Haitians are legals. Yeah. He was talking about CBP1 and then the legal. That was funny. The futuristic squid flavored Jap. Don't worry, we'll talk about the advanced cereal tech in a moment. Let me get this out. What else did I want to say about this? I think I got most of what I want to say out. We're gonna have to sleep on this, honestly. I want to get to this caller. Let's see. Those are my initial kind of thoughts on the vibe and the spirit of the debate. I think I said plenty on some of the content, and I'll probably have more to say moving forward. Yeah, I made my point right about the low bar on what is possible. And honestly, this is a criticism they give Trump, like, you're not really going to deport or mass deportations. You're not really going to do. Honestly, I don't want to be too cynical about that, because look, can we all agree that okay, here's what I'm trying to say, is that basically I'm just way more, my thinking on what must happen is just radical and more right-wing than the GOP and even Trump, at least Trump presents to be. So look, the candidate that we want, that I want, I guess, and maybe some of you agree with me, is going to come down later. Okay, this is going to be what must happen, what's required of the people and the candidates is not even available to us. I mean, just look at the VP candidates available to us, the range of men that exist in the country now. Maybe this is ignorant. Like, in America, this is the range. You got your JD Vances, your Tim Walzes, and what's in between. It's like, oh, there's not a lot to pick from. But that's somewhat true, right? Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me where I'm wrong. Yeah, what else can I say? These are just kind of my nitpicking on the debate. JD Vance, well-crafted. What would you say? Was he weird? All that weird stuff is just stuff to make us... It's just media tricks to try and make us not support JD Vance at such a critical time when we're really supporting Trump. But, you know, and using that to divide us from Trump and wedge us and all that. So I'm not going to fall for all that. I think he was a millennial. He was a millennial Republican guy doing his best, who grew up the way he grew up. I don't know what I'm saying with that. But look, let me get to Diego. I believe I have a Diego on the air. Please, go ahead. Oh, hold on.
Hey, how you doing, man?
Diego, thank you so much for your... Is it Diego?
Yeah, it's Diego.
Are you on speakerphone?
No.
Welcome to the stream, sir. Go ahead. Thank you for calling.
Yeah, well, I thought that it was kind of neutral.
You sound like you're on a speaker. Are you sure, Diego? I think you're lying to me.
No, I'm not a speaker.
You're using AirPods?
Yeah, probably a little cheap ones.
Okay, can you switch to just your phone up to your ear, please?
There we go.
Thank you, Diego. Sounds a lot better. Go ahead.
All right, there we go. Yeah, but I thought JD was holding back a couple punches because I thought he was trying to be kind of respectful for his older gentleman, you know. And the way that I see it, you were scoring by points, right? I was scoring by eye contact. Every single time someone made a point that kind of like resonated in their heart or in their minds, they just looked at each other. That was kind of neutral. So I kept that in mind. JD did score a lot of points on that, but I thought that, you know, Tim kind of wanted to pass the torch on to a young gentleman and kind of told him probably like in his own way, you'll see maybe later on.
You're saying Vance is that? Vance is this person that Trump is trying to pass the torch on to?
No, Tim. I thought Tim was trying to pass the torch on to JD.
Oh, you say Tim was?
Vance. Yeah.
Hey, help me understand what you're getting at.
Like the way I see it, every single time he tried to make a point about his personal life, that is Tim, Vance did give him that recognition that because you're an older gentleman, so let me learn from that, you know. So that's the way I see it. Before they got all to it, before Tim kind of lost his way and started talking about some feminists and women stuff and all that kind of stuff, but it was before that. It was in the middle of the debate, kind of towards the end. They were just kind of giving each other the old kind of like young buck versus the old buck in this politician world. Because you said that they're both politicians, so they kind of have themselves a little bit scripted. Vance did pull punches because he wants to get more votes, and he understands because he's young like us, you know. I'm in my 30s, and
please go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I mean I share some of what you said about yeah, I share some of that. Don't let me cut you off. What were you saying?
But at the same time, after the points, then I started to really see what Vance wanted to what he really wanted to say, you know. But he couldn't really say so much. It's like he's kind of like holding back. This is the first debate. I don't think there will be any more after this. It's all going to be in the White House, and then that's he's going to really launch himself and express himself and actually do a lot more things that Kamala did. Mm-hmm. You know, with the border and with the pharmaceuticals and with the drugs and all that. But that's for another topic. But it was just today. It was more about we're only going to have one debate, young buck versus old buck, and it just seemed to me it was very respectful. I liked it. I'm not going to call it really neutral on the sense that who lost or who won. Vance really did got a hold of a lot of stuff, you know, and I don't want to keep all the callers holding in, you know. But I
agree with a lot. I agree with a lot of what you're saying, especially how they pulled. I mean, the evidence is how, for example, even on the Haitians, you know, he basically said, yeah, well, look, the problem is the Haitians, but he says it in a nice way. They're filling up the hospitals. They're filling up the housing, as opposed to Trump saying they're eating the dogs. They're not supposed to be here. So it's like, and even Kamala too. Tim Walz and JD are like Tim is like Kamala, and JD is like Trump in like subject matter, but they are like a very sanitized politician version of each other, and so it made it way more boring. It made it but yeah, all those things. But what do you think about what are your thoughts on how the public will take it? And well, first, what in your mind, like, was there a winning moment or moment that really drives it home for you? Who's the winner, and how do you think the public's taking it?
Well, I'll tell you this. Tim actually kind of surprised me. Tim Walz surprised me. I think he's the person who's going to pick up Kamala, because Kamala does a lot of salad scrambling, and he's probably the breadstick and the soup. Like, you love to eat that stuff, you know, and the salad's for the side for whatever. Vance, just like how you say, you know, he's right. He's like that little kid cheering on his dad, like, yeah, Dad, you tell him. But then when they tell the kid, well, what did your dad mean? Oh, well, he was trying to say this, but, you know, very respectful. While the dad is like, you know, son, you know, but so I thought that was actually kind of pretty cool. You know, you have Kamala, does not, I don't even know if I say it right. What does Vivek say? Kamala?
I forget.
I don't know what it says. And so she needs someone to kind of be like, what did I say, Tim? And then Tim's gonna be like, you know, this is what you meant, and this is what you said, and this is this and that. For a second, I thought, oh wow, is he running for presidency or vice presidency? They're probably gonna share the spot, you know. He's probably gonna do a lot of damage control on her end, you know. But he doesn't want to do that. That's why he was looking at JD like, you know what, young buck, you got this. Listen to Trump.
You could read all that from the look?
Just from the eye looks, just from the face expressions, from the head nods, you know. They did not even look down at their notes when one was speaking upon their heart and upon their mind. But also, you know what Jesse said, like, don't believe all thoughts and stuff. But at the same time, you could just tell the face expressions, the shoulders, the back, everything, you know?
Man, Diego,
So
is this your first time calling me?
Yeah, it's my first time calling.
Right on, man. I appreciate your call big time, man. Can you call me again?
Yes, I can, sir. You have a good night.
A pleasure, Diego. Take care.
All right.
All right, y'all. I told you to don't dilly-dally and call me, okay? I mean, yeah, you can still call me. We're still going to eat up the cereal. We're about to pour the milk. But, you know, we're about to eat cereal. It's not time to talk anymore. So, I mean, do it now, I guess. But I'm pretty much closing the line soon. You can call me tomorrow, obviously. All right, y'all. I got this high-tech Japanese cereal tech. Very nice. Look, I don't even know some of the flavors, but it's special. Thank you, Cold Burger. This has been a very interesting addition to my repertoire. Not squid flavored, okay? It's more like chocolate, granola-y, strawberry kind of thing going on. Kind of tings. Okay? Very high tech Japanese cereal tech. Very cool stuff. I've already had a bowl of this. It's good stuff. I haven't tried the other ones you gave me though. From the same brand, different flavors. We're getting down with some funky cereals I've never had, and it's quite exciting. We got the 2%. We got the whole milk, obviously. We got the. It's not raw, okay? Don't get mad at me, right wing. Okay, this is some Rockview ultra pasteurized. But yeah, everybody get what cereal? Let's go. What cereals are you drinking? What cereals are you drinking? What cereals are you eating? Cereals in the chat. Go ahead. Post your cereals. We pouring milk. Post your cereals in the chat. We're having LNC. LNC is a special tradition close to my heart. I grew up with one individual. His name is Eddie. You can know his name. That's not a big deal. No, it's not in a can. It's in a bottle. His name is Eddie. We grew up together. He is my brother, essentially. And this is one of our oldest traditions, which I have shared with my audience for some time now. We don't always do it. We've been doing it more lately. But LNC, I grew up with LNC. LNC is when you had the deepest talks and you made the deepest connections. And it was the most important of times. And so I'm here to share LNC with all of you. So this one goes to, I don't know, Trump and goodness and LNC forevermore. Okay, so time to eat up your cereal.
Milk and cereal. Milk and cereal. Cereal and milk. Milk and cereal. Cereal, cereal. Milk and cereal. Cereal and milk. 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 Give them to the needy. Feeling kinda greedy. I keep them for myself. 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 No, I keep them for myself. I keep them for myself. I keep them for myself. Mom likes special care. Can't pitch an inch. You 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 can't pitch an inch. The magically delicious. Yeah, something like a jar. Jack, you skip on a crack, you break your mama's back, Rice Krispies. Blueberry. milk and cereal, milk and cereal, cereal and milk, milk and stereo, 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 milk and cereal, cereal and milk, milk and Cheerio, cereal and milk, cereal and milk, cereal and milk, Cheerio, yo, 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 oh yo, Cheerio, yo, Cheerio, yo, 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 Cheerio, yo, 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 in the morning at your table, milk and cereal, snap, crackle, pop, 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 snap, crackle, pop. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, 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 cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Tricks off for kids, 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 for kids, tricks off for kids, tricks off for kids, tricks off for kids, tricks off for kids. Milk and cereal, milk and cereal, milk and cereal. Milk and cereal, milk and cereal, milk and cereal, and no fruit nuts for grandma. Grandma eats a bread muffin.
All right, y'all. Hope you enjoyed the stream today. We killed our bowl of cereal, LNC. It's a pleasure to share it with all of you. It's near and dear to my heart. All right, y'all. That's it from me. We got Manhood Hour, the Jesse Lee Peterson Show tomorrow. Don't miss it. And of course, American Anchor, baby, tomorrow, 4 p.m. I don't know what we're gonna do tomorrow, but we're gonna do it. I love y'all. Appreciate you being with me today. I'm out. Take care. Peace.